there isn't a clarity on those metrics that I think would be really important for fans to understand. Why is it that we're able to do a player plus cash deal in such trying times when we face, who knows, a fortnight, 3 weeks before this impending deadline that could potentially mean points deductions for Aston Villa in the seasons to come? Hello and welcome back to the Villa podcast. It is I, your solo host, Dan Wiseman, coming to you after what's been a long and news-packed week or so in the Villa sphere. Dan is currently away. He's away in the States doing some fantastic work for his day job, which means that you're left in the not-so-capable hands of myself to run you through, some pretty big news in the world of Aston Villa. Let's start with the headlines. The biggest is Douglas Luiz. It looks like he is all but perhaps 24 hours away from being confirmed as a Juventus player. It looks like Aston Villa will be receiving around 20 million euros, so between 16 to 17 million pounds, as well as two players. It'll be Weston McKennie and Samuel Iling-Junior. It'll be interesting to see what kind of profiles that we're getting in those two players. We'll do some deeper dives into those two guys later on. There is also Jhon Duran, who looks to be leaving the club for more than double the price that we signed him for from Chicago Fire just 18 months ago. It looks like Chelsea are the club that are interested in his services. And then the final one is Matty Cash, heading to AC Milan for a fee that we're looking to try and boost up to around £30 million. Paulo Fonseca is the new manager of AC Milan. He was the manager of Lille this season, so it looks like in that Europa Conference League cash, in which Matty Cash scored from the penalty spot, as well as getting the equaliser that pushed the game to extra time. Looks like Paulo Fonseca on the opposite touchline was impressed from what he saw from the Polish right back and is looking to bring his services out to the Rossoneri. But to be honest with you, after going over and over this episode in my head, it was very difficult to decide what kind of episode it would be. As much as I tried to sit here and give you the analytics, the stats, the deeper dive into the three players that we're selling, as well as the couple of players that we're getting in exchange as part of that Douglas Luiz transfer, it didn't really feel right. And to be honest with you, it's not really what I'm interested in at this stage. And I don't mean to do a disservice there to the two fantastic players that we're looking at bringing in. But this is more of a conversation around the Premier League PSR rules, FFP, and the position that Villa have been forced into, essentially, by the profit and sustainability rules that currently govern the Premier League spending. It's a difficult one for me because I want to start this by saying that I think some restrictions or some governance on the way that Premier League clubs spend their money is good for the league and is good for football. I think Premier League spending generally is out of control, and I think the Premier League have intended to do some good with these regulations. But I think as we've gone further and further into this cycle of financial restrictions, loopholes have been, not necessarily loopholes, but ways have been discovered by clubs to exploit these rules, and it's meant that academy assets like Jaden Philogene, like Cameron Archer, like Aaron Ramsey, have become pawns in a bigger chess game in the Premier League. Items that clubs can look to boost the value on and then sell. It has completely changed the way that clubs view their academies and what once were some of the most cherished players in any team, players that you've brought through the local area that have come through your academy and have established themselves in the first team. That relationship has gone. Some of the core pieces that maintain the fans' connection to any given team have been completely distorted and manipulated by these Premier League rules. And whilst the onus is on the Premier League, the clubs do need to take some onus on that. But Villa complied. Villa complied last summer when they sold those three players that I mentioned. Villa had spent in the last 4 years around £370 million, which is just ninth of all Premier League clubs in that time. The big six combined all rank above Villa, to no surprise at all, and have splashed nearly £4 billion since the summer of 2020. And so, despite finishing above three of those clubs in Chelsea, Manchester United and Tottenham, Villa are in a position where the rules have come back to bite them, and we face this position in which we need to sell players, and not just sell players for high fees, but we need to sell players and sell them quickly, because it seems to be that the cut-off point in terms of the balancing of the books and entering those financial accounts for year-end comes at the end of June, which is ultimately a deadline that Nottingham Forest missed and paid the price when they were deducted points earlier this season. They tried to argue that the sale of Brendan Johnson to Spurs, which came later than the end of June, should be taken into account when considering their accountability and how they figured in terms of the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. They fell short of that and were given a points deduction as a result. The point of these rules, so the Premier League say, is to improve and preserve clubs' financial sustainability and the competitive balance of the Premier League, promote the aspiration of clubs, and facilitate a workable alignment with other relevant competitions and support clubs' competitiveness in UEFA Club competitions, whilst providing certainty and clarity for clubs, fans and stakeholders. And that's a direct quote from the Premier League. I think as I read that, there were a few words that jumped out, namely clarity for clubs, fans and stakeholders, which certainly hasn't been provided on a mass level. Competitiveness in UEFA Club competitions. We saw how poorly English clubs have done this season in European competitions as a whole, Villa included in that. And I think whilst Villa are just one of 3 clubs in the Premier League to have no debt aside to their name, just 3. And so you could argue that the club's financial sustainability, one of the key terms listed at the very start of that PSR introduction, has never been more impenetrable than it is for Aston Villa right now. Financially, the club is in a good place, and it is a good place to, should these restrictions not exist, go on and enhance our position in the Premier League, and who knows, perhaps even the Champions League, which we've obviously qualified for next season. And so Nassef Sawiris, we all saw his quotes. He has a very strong opinion on this, and rightfully so. Playing clubs are essentially incentivized to sell that homegrown talent that I mentioned earlier, which penalizes their loyalty and commitment to young players, which is so valued to many clubs, but particularly Villa. We've seen how we've enhanced our academy, both with the Inner City project and to what we've been providing at Bodymore in recent years. And whilst you could argue that some of that is to raise the sellability of those players, you know that any player that comes out of Cobham, for example, Chelsea's academy, automatically has a £20-30 million price tag attributed to their name from day dot, and perhaps that is something that Villa are looking to emulate. But we've also seen that the storylines that exist within a Jacob Ramsey, going back a few years within a Jack Grealish, are one of the linchpins of this squad, and it is what, in this era of state-owned football clubs, of huge import of talent from the continent and beyond, it is what truly instills a sense of community, togetherness and connection to a fan base. And I think it's really disappointing that Jadon Philogene-Benes has not been allowed to continue his story at Aston Villa. Cameron Archer has not been allowed to continue his story at Aston Villa, and Aaron Ramsey the same. I think those are 3 players that we would love to have kept hold of, but we sold in order to make sure that we complied with these regulations. And as I say, I do believe inherently that this is a good thing for the Premier League, or that some measure of financial restrictions are a good thing for the Premier League. We have gotten to this position because we are not owned by a nation state. We're not a Newcastle. We're not a Manchester City. We're not potentially an Everton, who are all backed by the wealth funds of sovereign entities. In fact, we have done this through sporting merit, essentially, and I think that's what makes our rise into the Champions League all the more important. But to be rewarded at the end of that success by having to sell who is, in my opinion, the best technical footballer at Aston Villa is disappointing. Is disappointing, and I think a lot of fans have had a gripe with the deal itself, the way it's structured, the fact that there isn't a larger lump sum of cash, and that's where my real query with the certainty and clarity that is supposedly being provided for fans kicked in, because I think have all been a little bit confused that this isn't a straight player for cash deal, and that we are balancing the books in that way. So, as we all thought, we sell a Douglas Luiz for upwards of 60, 70, 80 million pounds, and then that cash is all that we need. And it seems that apparently that's not the case, and that's why this is a little bit confusing. We are getting, in terms of cold hard cash, just 60 to 17 million pounds from the Douglas Luiz deal, and I'm aware that's potentially counted by sales for Matty Cash and Jhon Duran. But there isn't a clarity on those metrics that I think would be really important for fans to understand. Why is it that we're able to do a player plus cash deal in such trying times when we face, who knows, a fortnight, 3 weeks before this impending deadline that could potentially mean points deductions for Aston Villa in the seasons to come? It's an unknown. On the footballing side of it, I think it's a crying shame that we're losing Douglas Luiz, but I feel genuinely privileged to watch the player of his ability. I think he's the best footballer currently at this football club, and I think it will be a tremendous miss to see him go. What I will say is that in terms of a profile, I think we're probably signing the right player in that regard. I think that whilst I think he's the most technically gifted player we have at this club, he's potentially one of the most technically gifted player that I've seen at Aston Villa in my lifetime. There are more Douglas Luizes in the world than there are Jhon McGinns, and I do genuinely believe that. So there are Ollie Watkins and there are Emi Martinez's, then there potentially are Jacob Ramsey's. I think we already have someone like Youri Tielemans in the squad, who, whilst maybe not to the same extent, still has that same technical ability, still has that ability to arrive late in the box, crash the box from distance, and add goals and assists into key games. We've shown it this season. Whereas if I was the scouting department at Aston Villa and I was tasked with one of the two, go and find me another Douglas Luiz or go and find me another Jhon McGinn, I think I'd know in terms of finding a stylistic and a profile that is close or can replicate that player. I think Douglas Luiz is the easier find, I really do. And it's the same kind of argument I've raised with someone like Tyrone Mings in the past when compared to an Ezri Konsa. And though I think we can all agree that Ezri Konsa is the more superior defender, there aren't many 6'5" left-footed centre halves that can play at a Premier League level, that can dribble the ball, that can pass, that has experience of playing at left back and everything that comes with that. Tyrone Mings is, in a footballing sense, very much a unicorn, and there aren't too many others like it. And so I know that this club is in good hands. I think we need to judge Weston McKennie by what he's achieved at Juventus, not by what he achieved in a relegation season in a very poor Leeds side. He's been almost ever present for Juventus this season, appearing in all of their league games. And I know that this isn't particularly great, or wasn't a particularly great Juventus side. And the Massimiliano Allegri, they're now looking at appointing Thiago Motta in from Bologna, who's a fantastic job of getting that club into the Champions League. So it looks like Douglas Luiz will be arriving under a more progressive manager. I think Matty Cash is a sale that's been on the door for some time. I think it's pretty clear to see that he's not a mainstay in Unai's plans. The fact that Ezri Konsa, a makeshift right back, would prefer to play at centre-half has been preferred over Matty Cash has been quite damning on his position for some time. We also have the arrival of Kosta Nedeljkovic from Red Star to come in at right back. It'll be really exciting to see what we're getting from that entity. So when he comes in pre-season. And then finally, there's Jhon Duran. And this one, again, is a real shame, but I think if you're Aston Villa, there is only really one club in world football, really, that we could hope to fetch 40, 50 million pounds from for a sale of Jhon Duran, and that is Chelsea. It looks like the players had Chelsea on his radar for some time, going back as far as January or so. Reports say, if anyone has been looking at his Twitter likes over the past 6 months, you'll know that that has been his preferred destination, it seems, for some time. And you have to imagine in those three players, we're looking at an almost combined 100 million in sales for three players that I think we can continue without. And that's very hard to say for one more than the two, which is obviously Douglas Luiz. Jhon Duran has fantastic ability, but I think there has been questions over his attitude for some time. And I think that is really something that I'm surprised Chelsea... Well, I'm surprised on the one hand, also not on the other. I think it's exactly the opposite of what Chelsea need. Chelsea need reliability, they need consistency, they need level heads, and they need maturity. None of those things are things that I'd attribute to Jhon Duran, although he is a fantastic prospect if you can get him in the right state of mind. And Matty Cash, I am pleasantly surprised by this sale, because I think selling Matty Cash to another Premier League team would have been really, really hard. I think in the right system, he would have excelled. And there would have been many moments where watching Super Sunday, watching Match of the Day, we would have been almost disappointed that we sold Matty Cash should he have gone to another English side. I think selling him abroad is a fantastic situation, because who knows, we may never have to face Matty Cash again. should he go, I'd wish him all the best at Milan. I think it's a fantastic deal for the player and for the club, and it's one out of this three. It's probably the one that I consider to be the best deal for all parties, to be honest with you. The other news is that Felipe Coutinho, it seems, has terminated his contract with the club. We're yet to receive official confirmation of that, but it looks like, a deal which was due to run out next season, I believe, has now come to an end. Again, another crying shame, still the most exciting transfer that we've conducted in my time supporting the club. Nothing will, I don't suppose, again, come quite close to the excitement that we all felt when we announced the signing of Felipe Coutinho on loan from Barcelona and then on a permanent in his first match week. That comeback against Manchester United, in which he got an assist, and I think it was a goal in the end, but essentially put the ball in the back of the net. It's a game that I'll never forget. So for that moment, and almost that moment alone, the masterclass against Leeds, I'm very grateful that I got to see Felipe Coutinho in a Villa shirt. And unfortunately, the signing probably came a year too early, because under Unai Emery, I think there's a world in which Felipe Coutinho would have had a very, very different time at Aston Villa. And so, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I could talk forever and a day on this subject. I don't mean to sound downbeat. I'm wary that I am, but I'm very disappointed to be losing Douglas Luiz. We are getting two wonderfully gifted players. I'm so excited to see what Samuel Iling-Junior could do in a Villa shirt. We'll definitely come back to this to do some deeper dives into his playing style, exactly where he's going to fit in this Villa team. Potentially looks like left wing backs. That's a very interesting signing from Villa there. But I'm very disappointed to be losing Douglas Luiz. I really, really am. One of my favourite players in this current Villa side, someone that it was a genuine privilege to watch him, and the way that he really turned his Villa career around over the 5 years that he was at the club. He's gone from being someone that was really the best of a bad situation at the number 6 position to genuinely becoming, in my opinion, one of the best box-to-box midfielders in the Premier League. And so it's with a heavy heart that I'll wish him goodbye, but he goes with my full faith that he'll be absolutely excellent in Serie A. It's a league that I think will suit his talent perfectly, and under Motta, hopefully a manager that will really continue to get the best out of him. It would be a pleasure, hopefully, to come up against him one day in the Champions League. But yeah, we'll be back at full strength soon, guys. We'll do a much deeper dive into these three players, but I felt that the narrative was more important as we wait for these deals to be completed. So if you'd like to get to know any of those players, we want a deeper dive into the Duran, the Cash, the Douglas Luiz sales, as well as to the purchases of Weston McKennie and Samuel Iling-Junior. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you leave a like. Let me know what you think of these deals. How do you feel about the predicament that Villa find themselves in? Are you happy with these deals? Do you think we're overselling, underselling on the value of these players? Let me know. And guys, make sure you stay tuned for the next episode. So the pleasure to come to you. I'm sorry for the wait, but yeah, I think we're back for the summer. Have a great week. Enjoy it, and we'll see you soon. Up the Villa.